Okay, guys, you should be able to, hear me now. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Good to hear that. Okay, fine. So, guys, let's give a few more seconds before we start this session. But before that, I want to do a quick poll. All the people who love to use AWS console, hit console in the chat, and if you prefer to use CLI, just hit CLI in the chat. Let's do a quick poll. How many of you like to, use console, and how many of you like to use CLI? Just see those messages coming into chat. Okay, Udit likes to use CLI. That's good. What about others? Archana likes to use console. Okay, some more messages, guys. Come on, let's do a stuff on chat as well so that we are connected. By the way, chat is the only window through which I can speak to you guys. So chat is the medium for me to go and hear your feedback. So Yagnesh likes to do console, which Vraj likes to use CLI. Tarun likes to use console till now. Yes, that's something that I want to change. Wow, Nimal is saying Terraform. That's cool. Okay. Pat says CLI, Vaishali says console. So Nilesh Bhai is saying I wanted to use both, some case CLI and some case console. Convenient, yes. If you're using some new services, then yes, we have to kind of go through console. If not, CLI is much better. Okay, console when internet is available, and CLI when internet is not available for from internal machines. Cool concept. Okay, guys, I think we are good. We've got what 22 people watching right now. Let's start this session. Okay, by the way, I have taken the feedback of the previous session, and we are going to, use and see all the commands, today, so that it's going to be more of, you know, a live coding kind of a session rather than just a presentation, which was the case in our previous session, right? So let's do so by the time I'm shifting, let's do a quick. Okay, how many people are here, Jigar? Just put the number so that everybody can see. And guys, please put this up into various groups so that people can see our channel more and more, and we get more traction onto our YouTube live streams. 25 till now. Okay. Okay, good to see the numbers. Let's hit the. Okay, fine. Guys, I'm going. Okay. Guys, let me know when you can see my terminal window. It should be visible. Can you guys see? Hi guys, can you see the new screen? Yes, now it is visible, right? Okay, everybody can see the screens now. Okay, fine. So let's start. See, well, I think a lot of you already said that you prefer to use CLI. So I believe a lot of you people would know some basics about CLI. For an example, AWS configure is something that everybody would be aware of, so that you should know how to set the AWS credentials when you install the AWS CLI, right? So I'm not going to cover that part. It's going to be very short session, okay? But I want to cover the things which basically you should know. When see, where do we use CLI? For example, you're working for a customer who doesn't want to give an access to a full-fledged console, right? Okay, so what? we can do in that cases, we can ask them to set up a CLI based access for us, so that you can run all the commands locally, check logs and everything. Okay, and then manage the whole resources from your CLI itself, rather than asking them to open up console and giving us way more access than we should, right? No, did. So I'm going to see the flow of this session is I'm going to walk you through a few commands. Okay, majorly I'm going to take care of S3, Lambda functions, and API gateway. API gateway is one of the challenging stuff when you have to do using CLI. But once you get a nick of it, yeah, it's a really good option. Okay, so once we are done with this session, things would go on to my blog. You would be able to see all the commands and everything through that particular blog, so that all the commands that I've used during this session would be available post our live stream onto my blog, as well as in the description of this video. Okay, so give it a day or two, you would be able to see all those updates available onto my blog. Okay, fine. So let's start with what we like to do first. Okay, so see, one of the major thing uh, which I basically like to see is this thing. Oh, first command not working, is it? Fine. So anyways, so idea is basically how to, why it's not working. Let's see. What does AWS say? AWS should say get region is sufficient for me to see the region. Okay. Somehow, okay, fine. So idea is basically, how to see the region, okay, in which you want to run the commands. For now, we'll go back to this later on. But for now, for example, default region which is set for everybody is US East 1. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I want to list. So let's start with S3 first. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through listing and creating a new bucket, and then probably deploying something onto S3. Okay, this is something which is very easy, and the first step, like whenever you are working with any CI/CD tools, or if you want to use it in any kind of a deployment, so you should use CLI commands, right? So if I do AWS S3 LS, which is going to give me that what are the different buckets which are created into my you know particular account. There are plenty of it. This is my dev account, so it's gonna be good amount of S3 buckets created here. Okay. Now what I want to do is, okay, I'm gonna keep this thing next to us so that everybody can see the commands as well while I'm typing. Okay. Can you guys quickly tell me if you can see still see the screens properly? The fonts and everything is visible. I'm waiting for feedback. Give it for a few seconds. Okay. Okay, good. It takes, there is some lag here, so that the feedback is coming a bit late, but it's okay. Let's continue. Okay. So first thing first, what we are going to do is we are going to create a new bucket. Okay. So the creating a new bucket, the command is s3mb, which is for make bucket. What I'm gonna do is let's create something which is demo abc second, something like that. Okay. Okay, by the way, I'm using this profile, if you can see, okay, at the end of the command. Okay. Why? Because if you want to run multiple accounts within your AWS CLI, AWS CLI provides an option, okay, to run that within the sessions. Okay. That way, wow, we are not able to even create a demo account. Okay. So we got stream, something like that. Let's see. It must be because, oh, okay. Thanks for the hint, Udit. Yes, I'm making one mistake here. Let's see. Yes, so the bucket has been created. Let's see. We should be able to see the sessions. Okay, where is it? Yeah, it's demo ABC YouTube stream, right? So we can see the uh, command which helps us to create the bucket. Okay, now a lot of us basically do a lot of uh, code deployments and upload of files in between your local instance to AWS console, right? We always go to S3 bucket and then do upload and everything, right? You can simply uh, go to any bucket and copy anything, okay, by just using AWS CLI commands. So now what I have is, let me go to my S3 bucket. I've created a simple index.html file. Okay, what I'm going to do is I want to copy this file into the bucket, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use cp command, AWS S3 cp. We'll do index.html s3 colon double slash. What was the name of our let's copy that. Okay, and then I'm gonna use profile db. That's the profile that I have created into my account. Okay, now understand one thing. Okay, by default in S3 everything is private. Now if I want to make something which is publicly available to read, right, what I can do is I can set up an ACL which says public read. Okay, so the structure is like this. AWS S3 CP stands for copy. If you are familiar with using Linux, then it's gonna be very easy. So the file name, the bucket name, ACL. If you want to set, in this case I want to set up an ACL as public read, because after this we are going to host this website as well. So that's something that I'm going to do after this session. Okay, nav hyphen profile dv. So that's the profile that I'm using. Okay, now question is, what do we do if we have multiple files, right? So option is recursive. Okay, what do we do if we want to exclude some file, right? Option is exclude. Sorry for the typo here, but we are not going to run any of this command because it's a single file, right? We don't need to do recursive or we don't need to do exclude. Okay, so I hope this thing works. Okay, so we already, let's do, so another thing is, how do we cross verify, right, whether that particular thing is, I forgot to put my, I forgot to put, wow, what happened to my session? If we do profile dv, then it should display what are the files inside to it. Okay, that's how we'll be able to see everything and the contents of that particular bucket. Now, see, one thing that everybody does a mistake in, usually if you're using AWS CLI command to copy files from local to AWS console, one of the major thing that you need to consider is S3. In S3 you get charged for all the put calls that you do. Put calls means, if you're creating new files, if you are copying files from local to your S3 bucket, it is chargeable after certain times, right? So you need to be very cautious when you're using it. Of course the cost is not that huge, but if you're working for a customer who wants to transfer bigger chunk of files or bigger chunk of files over the period of certain times, then you need to consider what commands to use, right? Okay, Moin, I'm going to take questions at the end of the session. So, Jigar and Nilesh, can you just curate all the questions and let take all the questions one by one at the end of the session? Okay. So, you need to use you need to use this copy command very accurately, or in a way that it doesn't charge your customers too much. Okay, so the other options that I've been using and I'm kind of fond of is this AWS S3 Sync command. Okay, I'll just give you an example now. AWS S3 Sync command, what it does is basically it would track all the files, from local to your S3 bucket, okay, or vice versa as well. So all the commands that you are seeing, AWS S3 CP, AWS S3 Sync, it works both ways. So you can sync your local directory to AWS S3 bucket using AWS S3 Sync command. At the same time, if you want to sync your S3 bucket to your local directory, you would be able to do the same thing as well. So you just need to reverse the order. So if you want to sync S3 sync, okay, I want to sync some XYZ bucket, okay, to my local file, I'll do this. And if I want to sync my local directory to S3 bucket, I'll do my bucket link. That's the ideal way you should run the command. Now, what is the difference between CP and sync? Okay, when you do CP, what basically it does is it would go out and put all the files which are there, copy everything blindly from local folder to S3 bucket or from S3 bucket to your local folder. But if you want to do this process recurringly, okay, if you want to run this thing frequently, so for example, I'm a developer who's been working on some HTML or some website, and I need to push my code back and forth between S3 bucket to my local laptop, right? What I can do is basically I can use sync command. What it does is basically sync would track all your file changes. Okay, so first time when you do sync, it's probably going to copy all the files from local to your S3 bucket. From next time onwards, what it's gonna do is basically it's gonna sync only the files in which it sees the changes. Okay, so that's something that everybody needs to consider, whether to use CP or whether to use sync. In ideal cases, when you are working for a customer like web interface or something like that, if you want to push your code back and forth between S3 bucket to your local directory, okay, you should consider using sync, because one, it would be faster since you're not pushing the whole directory together, you are just pushing the content. Okay, that's one thing. Second, it would be cost saving because you're not sending multiple put calls to your S3 bucket. Okay, now another usage that we have seen of S3 bucket is to use that as a website, right? So again, I'm taking the same example. What I want to do is I want to convert my current S3 bucket into a demo abc.youtube stream, okay, into a website, a static website. Okay, I'll have to give them index if I'm not wrong. Yeah, index document. And if we do profile bv, okay, what it's gonna do is basically it's going to create our S3 bucket to allow static web hosting. Okay, now another good thing to consider. Okay, now whatever bucket name that you have defined, okay, everything gets converted into a standard URL. Okay, so basically HTTP unique bucket name, your S3 dash website, and then region name dot amazon aws.com. That's the standard path which is being set for your bucket. So let me do this demo abc.iq streaming dot s3 dash website. Hey, sorry, I yesterday dot us east one amazon.aws.com. Okay, so this is the file that we had uploaded earlier, right? Okay, so you would be able to upload the content, create a new bucket, and upload all the files from your local directory to the S3 bucket that you might have created, and then use it to host your static websites. Right. This is how you basically can create a whole S3 bucket into a website using simple AWS commands. Okay, so this is very helpful when you have to do recurring events. So I am a fond of using Visual Studio Code, and I keep on running my terminal. So whenever I want to, push something from local to my S3 bucket to any websites that I'm posting on S3, I simply do AWS S3 Sync, and it basically syncs all my files that are required or that are changed. So I don't need to kind of correlate every time that okay, what kind of files are there, what are the changes, what do I need to put, right? You can simply use a S3 sync command, which would allow you to push all the things from local to your lambda sorry, to your S3 buckets. Okay, now let's move to the next portion of it. So for an example, I've created a website. Okay, from the website, now I want to make some you know uh, dynamic changes to it. I want to create a simple form which takes inputs from the users, right? Now, how do I create a Lambda function which would process the business layer of it? At the same time, how do I create an API gateway which can be integrated with my HTML function, HTML file that I've created? So when somebody hits submit, it goes to the API gateway, and from API gateway, it goes to the Lambda function to send a request. This is kind of the usual flow that we have seen when it comes to serverless web application. Okay. Now, what if I don't have an access to a console and I want to, run a Lambda function, create a Lambda function, everything from my local instance? Okay, how do I do it? Very simple. Okay. Okay, by the way, before we go there, what I've done is everybody might have seen the Hello World Lambda code. Okay, so that is what I have kind of set up right now. It's a very simple, this is simple, like same as Hello World Lambda function that you had seen when you try to create a Lambda function from the blueprints. Okay, so it's going to be same, no changes at all. Okay, I'm taking a very simple example so that people don't get twisted into the codes. And yes, I prefer to work on Python, so you will see all the examples working around Python function itself. Okay, so this is a simple Python function that I have created. Now, what do I do? How do I create a Lambda function out of it? One thing that we are going to do is okay. Let me delete this functions itself. So this time I'm going to use US East 2, as you can see here. It's already been deleted, right? So there's nothing in it. Okay. And on the API gateway, do we have anything? Okay, I see test YouTube here. Let me delete that as well so that we don't see anything else. Okay, fine. So as you can see, there are no functions here. Okay, so the usual process when you do things using console is you go create function, you author from scratch, you give function name, you give runtime, and third thing that you give is an execution rule, right? These are the three things which basically we need when we create a Lambda function using UI, right? So before we go ahead, that's the same thing that we're going to do. I'm just gonna show you guys the code that I've used. It's very simple. It's same thing that I've seen. Hello world. So this is the Lambda function that has been created. So for us to create a Lambda function through UI, we need four things. We need function name. We need an IAM role. We need the code itself. Okay. And another thing that we usually, AWS passes by default is the region, okay, in which we are in, right? And yeah, runtime. So ideally, you will see these 4 5 parameters that are required to create a Lambda function. Now, let's do the same thing using uh, the code itself. Okay, I'm going to do certain mistakes right now, and we'll walk you through. that how this particular stuff works. Okay, so okay, major change that you need to do is I have a code available in Lambda function under Lambda directory. I need to create a zip file, a function code, a zip file of my code. Okay, what if I do zip minus x my function dot zip and then do lambda? So I'll have this my function dot zip directory, right? I'm going to show you one classic example that developers usually do when they start working with Lambda function. They don't know what structure is expected, okay, within your zip file. Before going ahead, I'll just tell you that this zip file is wrong. This is not how you should create a zip file. This is not how you should zip your code. But let's go through this example. We'll see it in the UI so that you guys understand that how is this structure and what do we have to follow to make things proper. Now, what do we need to create a Lambda function? As I said, okay, so the endpoint that we need to hit is AWS Lambda, then create function. Okay, then what do I need to give as my function name? So I'll say just again same my function. Okay, what runtime do I have to use? I'm going to use Python 3.7. Okay, which is the zip file that I've created. Now, see, understand, there are multiple options. You can create a zip file locally on your laptop itself. There are certain limitations, okay, in uploading those files from local to, your Lambda functions. Okay, so in that case, you could use an S3 bucket as well to host your code to zip the file, put it on S3 bucket. From S3 bucket, you can transfer those files onto your Lambda functions. But in this case, it's a very small function, so I'm going to use, where am I? It should work. My function dot zip. Okay, my function dot zip. Okay. Now, yeah, one more thing, handler. Okay. Now that's another thing that people, developers usually do a mistake in to understand what is the Lambda function in. So let me go back to the Lambda file. Okay. So Lambda or the handler that we are seeing, the handler that we need to pass here. Okay. It is usually file name dot your handler name. Okay, now where do I find this? So whatever file name that you have given, so in our case it is lambda underscore function, and when you do lambda function dot py, you will see the definition here that you have defined, right? Lambda underscore handler, that's what we need to define under handler. So lambda underscore function dot lambda underscore handler. I think that is what we have defined here, right? Lambda underscore handler and lambda underscore function. Okay, so that's the handler that we have defined. Role, as I mentioned, we need to supply a role, an IAM role, which allows lambda function to invoke and do certain operations in it, right? Okay, so what did we pass? We passed a function name, we passed a runtime, we passed a zip file, so where my code is hosted. Then we passed a handler, right? What is the name of the handler? And then we passed a role through which this lambda function would be executed. Now, what am I missing? Okay, I want to create this function specifically in US East 2, so I'm going to pass region as well. And I'm using multiple profiles, so I'm going to use profile command here. Okay, must be a non-empty zip. So I think we might have created something which is, so let's do a zip again. We go to the lambda zip minus x, my function dot zip, and then in that will give them a path of our Lambda function. So yeah, this should be good. Okay, so it was giving us an error of, let's try one more time. Hmm. Yeah, it was giving us an error because the zip file might not have created well. Okay, fine. So we have created a function called my function. Okay, runtime with Python 3.7. Role is this. This is the Lambda handler that we have defined. And what is the update status? It is successful. Now let's go back here and see if I can see the session. Yes, we can see our Lambda function here. Okay, if you can see, I wanted to show you an example of how you should create a zip file of your code. We'll go back to that again, but after uploading the file, if you can see the code here, that means the file has been uploaded properly. You need to cross verify lambda underscore function dot lambda underscore handler whether it is coming properly here or not. Okay. There are other operations that usually you incur. So for example, if you want to pass some environment variables, there are options for it. If you want to pass description, if you want to pass, VPC environment variables. So these are different things that are available in form of options. But minimum things that you need to supply when you create a Lambda function is basically a name, runtime environment, code, okay, your handler, and the IAM role that is required to create a Lambda function successfully. Now see, once the Lambda function is created, what we usually do, okay, first thing that we go and do is to test whether it is being created properly or not, right? So what I'm going to do is, okay, let's just update this thing. You can see the option as well. The code is very simple. What it does is basically it's going to print the values which we are receiving part of the event value variables that we are sending in, right? So when I do test here, I should be able to see Ankit set in the session. Okay, this is the output that we are expecting. Okay, now question is, what if I don't have access to this AWS console and I still want to invoke and I still want to test my Lambda function? How do I do it, right? That's where, you know, uh, we can basically do the invocation locally and try everything through our local CLI interface itself. Okay, let's try to do that. Okay, but before that, I have two more commands that I wanted to show you. Okay, now, yes, another thing is, for an example, I've created a code and I want to do some changes in it, right? And once the code is again changed, how do I push that code, onto my Lambda function? Let's do a quick change in it. So let me go to CD Lambda. Do a quick change here. Lambda function dot py. I'll do another print statement here. Wow, I'm not looking for numpy here. Okay, I'll do another print statement here. Testing live on the page. Okay, so I've just made some changes onto my Lambda function. Now, what do I have to do? How do I push this code again? How do I get these changes through to my live code which is already deployed on my AWS? Now run the same command. What we do is, okay, there's another shortcut that I usually follow. So if you do Control R, you will be able to see previous commands in the console. So which is something that I've been. So I'm going to create another zip file in. Okay. Now we are not going to use create function. What we are going to use in this case is we are going to use AWS Lambda update function code. Now, when you are updating your existing function code, what do we need? So we basically have to give function name, of course. So it is my function, okay, and then I need to give the code. It is zip file, right? Yes. Same way, the thing that we did previously, my function dot zip. Okay. Then I'm going to pass on the region again because we are not using the default region. And then I'm going to pass my, I hope it works. Yes, it is working. So you see the status successful. Now let's check whether the latest changes have been came from our local CLI to the function itself. Yep. So as you can see, we've got the latest code available onto our live AWS environment from the local CLI command, local laptop that we are using, right? So uh, these are the two major commands that I've been using personally, whenever I do the stuff. So you should just know your function name. You can simply zip the files locally and then push it directly from your local CLI to your AWS environment. Okay. Now, question is, how do we test this, right? How do we invoke our functions locally? How do I know? I don't have access to my AWS console. I don't get a chance to see whether my code has been pushed or not, right? How do I check? Simple. For that, we are going to do a command called invoke. Okay. Again, we are going to. Okay. Let me clear the screen so that people can see properly. Okay. Now we are going to do AWS Lambda invoke. Okay. Now when you do invoke, you want to give your function name. Okay. So what is my function name? It was my function. Okay. Now I simply don't do anything else. Yeah, one more thing which we need to pass on right now is, let's do out here and then we pass on region US East. Yes, first we'll have to pass the region US East to. Okay, and then we pass on our profile. Let's see what happens. Where did we invoke, and then I don't see a function name. FUNCTII AWS Lambda invoke hyphen function name my function, and then we do region, and then we do profile. That is perfect. Oh, okay, it's expecting an out file. Okay, fine. So we just give them an out file. Now, if you see, okay, this is very basic code, right? So you don't see unhandled. Like there are going to be challenges when you don't supply inputs to it, right? But still, the execution would work fine, and you would be able to see the status code 200 here, right? Now, question is, I don't want to do it this way. I want to supply some inputs, right? I want to provide my specific JSON inputs so that whatever JSON inputs I'm expecting coming in from API gateways gets processed, and I should be able to, see the latest numbers and everything, right? So how do I test that up, and how do I check the logs? So the another question that I've been getting from my developers is, how do, basically, we can see the log groups and the logs which are usually printing on the backend, right? So we'll go one by one. First, what we are going to do is we are going to pass a specific payload, okay, which would help us to invoke the Lambda function, but with specific inputs, similar to what we do, right, when we do test events, right? I want to do a similar stuff locally. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an invoke. Okay, I'm going to provide function dash name my dash function. Okay, and I'm going to provide payload in it. Let me copy this payload. It's the same thing that I've done there, nothing fancy here. Okay, hyphen region US East to hyphen profile. We are going to do dv, and then we are going to do out. But this command will not work, and I'll tell you why. Okay, let's hit this first. Okay, So you would get an error of invalid base 64. Why? So you need to understand one thing. I am using CLI version 2.0. Okay, this is the recent upgrade done by AWS, in which they have incorporated encryption on both the ways. So when you are passing up a payload from local to the your AWS console, it expects that to be available in base 64 encryption. Okay, so if you do normal text, you need to add another parameter to it. Okay, that's what I have added here. Okay, that's something that developers needs to understand because this is a recent change. Okay, even if you go to the standard AWS documentation right now, you will not see this thing firsthand. Okay, so keep a tab on this. So what I'm gonna do is, before payload, I'm gonna give another input. Okay, so CLI binary format, I'm sending it to raw. Okay, raw in base 64 out, so it's going to be an encrypted output. I'm gonna show you that as well. Let's wait for it. Okay, now you don't see any logs here, right? I just see status code 200 and nothing else. Correct? What I want to do is I want to see the actual logs which are coming from my Lambda functions, right? Similar to what, see, when you run this, when you run this thing here, right? Let's run it here. So you just see this, right? But I want to get information like this. I want to see the similar logs locally on my console, right? Let's do another round. But before that, let me clean the screen so that people can see stuff properly. Okay, I'm going to run the same lambda invoke command. Okay, now I'm going to provide function name, that is my function. Okay, I'm going to provide payload as well. So let me copy the payload again. Okay, let me provide the CLI binary command, so that CLI binary format. So in what format we are going to supply the content. Okay, and then region, because I am not doing it in my before, I did a mistake. Okay. Yes, profile dv, that's the profile that I'm using. Now what I want to do is I want to do tail all the logs which are coming in, right? So I'm gonna do tail hyphen query, and then I'm gonna query log result. Okay, and then output in form of text. Still we'll see one problem, I'll show you that. Let's run this thing. Okay, so when you run this, the only thing that you get is this gibberish log. Why? Because the output that you are sending is base 64 out. So this thing is basically a base 64 output. Now, how do I convert that into, a normal logs? Everybody usually has a base 64 library available within the Linux kernel itself. So when you do base 64 minus D, that's how you will be able to see the logs. So start request ID, value, value 2, value 3. This is what we are seeing on the front end itself, right? Okay, this is how you can see the logs. Okay, I understand too many things going back and forth. Okay, but these are to show you steps. In nutshell, what do you need? Let me go through that again so that people are clear on what do we have to do. Okay, so I've created a lambda. Okay, I've pushed that lambda function using my create function command. Okay, then I'm using update function code command to update the code of my Lambda function. If I want to invoke it locally, I need to use AWS Lambda invoke. And at the same time, if I want to pass on the payload, okay, payload needs to be passed in this format. You can supply, JSON file interface as well. There's no problem. The only thing that you need to consider is when you're working with CLI of AWS for version 2.0, you need to pass CLI option as well in form of to understand that which binary format you are expecting, like which format you are sending data in, right? And then region and profile, these are specific stuff that I'm doing. If you're using a default profile, you don't need to add this many options. Yes, this option would allow you to tail the logs which are coming in from Lambda. Okay, so this is how you would be able to see, you would be able to create the Lambda function, update the Lambda function, and then test your Lambda functions locally. Okay, these are step-by-step interfaces, step-by-step commands actually to run through, and that would help you to get you going with Lambda function. Don't worry about the commands; everything would be available on my blog later on. But yeah, ideally, if you are familiar working with command interface, this would get you going. And what I usually do is I set up shell scripts. Okay, so shell script takes an input in form of function name. Okay, so see, I'll give you a good example. So when I'm running this into my my repos, my AWS that I want to deploy new Lambda functions or anything like that, what I usually do is I create a shell script. So in shell script, I simply write the command. Now after that, what are the variable factors here? So variable factors are your function name and your zip file. Ideally, you have a same handler and same role across the stacks that you want to deploy, right? So yeah, until unless if you're using multiple IAM functions, you could use that as well. But what I usually do is I usually create a shell script, which basically, every time when I want to create a new function, I run the simple shell command with sh, create lambda.sh with certain inputs as the function name or the zip file path. These two parameters would get you going. So you can set this script once, and then what you can do is whatever projects that you're working on, you simply create that script every time. Just copy the script from one project to another project, and you would be able to deploy your code very easily and very fast. Okay, that's a good way to manage your codes as well. Okay, let's take a break for a minute. I know we are about to reach end of the session. We still have API gateway, which is one of the important stuff. But I want to take some questions from the users. So one of the questions I got so far is from Moin, right? How to download S3 file to local system using AWS CLI command. So what you can do is the way copy local as AWS S3 CP. You did AWS S3 CP from local to live, right? Similarly, you can copy files directly reversing the path. So when you are doing AWS S3 CP, you can AWS S3 CP S3 colon double slash whatever S3 bucket name is there, and then provide inputs to the folder in which you want to copy the file. Okay, any other questions, guys? I'm looking for some questions. Let's take a break for a minute or two. Let me answer some questions, and then we'll quickly go to the API gateway. Can you upload those commands? Yes, Bhargav. So after after my section, it would be available on the blog, and the link for that blog would also be available in the description of this video. So you would be able to see all these commands. Okay, any other questions, guys? I think we go to the tricky part of the session now, which is for API gateway. Okay. Now see, I think I don't know. A lot of you have created API gateways, within the uh, within console access as well, right? So API gateway is not simple, right? It's not a one-click deployment. You need to do a lot of stuff, right? So when you do create API, you need to decide what kind of API that you're looking at. For example, I'm looking for a REST API, right? So I'm gonna create build. When you do this, you need to give API name, description, and what is the endpoint type, regional or edge optimized or private, right? This is one thing. So when you, this is the first step where you are just defining a new API, name. That's it. You're not even doing anything else. Okay. Let's quickly jump onto that and understand that how can I create uh, let me clear this. Let me show you that how can we create a simple API gateway. So the format is like this. Whatever service that we have. So AWS is common. Whatever service that we want to use. So API gateway is what we want to do, and then there are various commands that we need to run. Right? Okay. Hyphen name. Okay. YouTube stream. Okay. Then I'm gonna supply my region because I'm not doing work on my default region, and then I'm gonna supply profile. Simple. Okay, it's not done yet. Okay, so what we have done is we have simply created a new API name. APIs. There's nothing inside. There's no resources. There is no methods. Nothing like there. Right? Let's see quickly. Okay, so you see YouTube stream is already created. Important thing to note is this ID. Okay, but we'll come back to that. Now we'll go to this YouTube stream API. Now there's nothing, right? There are no resources, there are no methods, nothing created within this section. Okay. Now, how do we keep a tab of this, right? How do we create different things within our Lambda function, within our API gateway? Okay, so I'm gonna go a bit quickly. So first thing first, what we are going to do is AWS API Gateway. We are going to create a resource. So for an example, under YouTube Stream, I want to get a user's endpoint. Okay, so now understand one thing. Everything is now divided into IDs. Up until now, you were simply giving names. Now everything is relational. So you want to create a resource under which, a resource ID or REST API ID. So in our case, the REST API ID is this one. Okay. Now we need to understand what kind of a resource do we need to create. Oh, sorry. Yes, one more thing. I missed one very important step. So when you have created this, okay, it by default creates a slash here. Okay, this slash is your root or this your parent ID. Okay, so how do we get our parent ID? What we do is we again go to API gateway. Okay, we do get resource and we provide REST API ID that we have from here. Okay, I'm gonna provide region as well and profile as DB. Oh, what happened? Following arguments are required. Okay, what do we have? Oh, we are correct. Get resources. Oh, okay. Very simple mistake. We did get resource or get resources. Okay, so as you can see, we have created this path slash. So this becomes your parent. That's where whole API interface is going to start from. Okay. So what we are going to do is now we are going to create. Okay, let me clear this and let me copy this from our reference so that we are clear on what do we have. That's our parent ID and that's our API ID. So I'm just going to list them here. Keep a note of this two stuff, right? That's where a lot of confusion happens within the API gateway creation. So there are two things. Which API you want to use, that is API ID. Under which structure you want to create this, okay? This is parent ID. Okay, so keep a tab on this. That's something very important for us to understand. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to create a resource using the parent ID that we got. Now, what I want to do is I want to get some users information. Okay, let me clear this. Okay, now let's understand API gateway. Under that, we are going to create a resource. So basically, what would be an endpoint? Okay, we are going to create an endpoint called users. And in users, we might have get, put, post, different calls, right? Okay, so this is the REST API ID. This is the parent ID. And then we have users endpoint that we are going to create. Okay, what it will do is it will create a path as slash users under the parent ID of default one. Let's see it in the browser that we have. Let's do a refresh. Udit, I'll take your question in a minute. So you see, we have created a users here. Now under users, there is nothing. So ideally what you do is you do create resource and then you do create method here, right? So we have created a resource and now under that resource, we want to create a new method. Okay. So what we are going to do is let's create a new this thing new method. So for that we'll copy the API ID and parent ID again. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to create a user's information. Okay, as a get call. So this is what I have done. Let me clear this. Okay, same API gateway put method. Put method means creating a new method. Now, what is your REST API ID? The main API ID that we have. Now, understand one thing. This is a resource ID which we get from the where is it? This one. Okay, which we didn't. We need to use that. So we did one mistake. That's why it's very confusing between API gateway. You want to put it, within the CLI interface. But yeah, so this is your REST API ID. Now the next thing that I want to create, the method that I want to create is not directly under slash. I want to create it under users, right? So the resource that I have to use, the resource ID that I have to use is should be for the users. Next thing is we need to supply our profile name as well. Profile, let's pass it on to B. Okay, so now we have a get method available under this resource. Let's go quickly and check this thing. Okay, so we have a parent resource. In that we have created a resource called users, and in that we have created a get method. But in that get method, we haven't created anything else here. So what do we integration? What kind of a setup that we have to do, right? So let's quickly do an HTTP, endpoint integration. For an example, what I want to do is I want to integrate a specific endpoint within my some information from outside. Now let's do another command. I'm gonna use the REST API that we have. Okay, HTTP method get, type is HTTP, integration type is okay. Fine. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put an integration. Now see, let's go step by step. First thing that we do is create REST API, which would create a whole new API as a function. Second is we create a resource in it, so which basically tells us that what kind of an endpoints we want to create within the session. Then we create a method in it: get, put, post, delete, options, whatever we want to create. Okay, and then we need to do integration with what, so you can integrate that with an HTTP interface, you can integrate that with a Lambda function, you can integrate that with a DynamoDB. Anything is possible. In our case, what we are going to do is we are going to use you know a simple HTTP endpoint that I have kind of identified. So I have kind of identified open exchange, like it simply gives you a currency list that we can use. So what do we have supplied here? So we do put integration, which tells me that what kind of interface, what kind of integration we need to do. And then what we do is we provide API ID, resource ID, and then we provide which method, what is the type. We do HTTP method here, and then integration is HTTP get, and then we provide the URI, the region, and profile. Okay, it's not gonna work. I'm gonna be very honest here. I know why. Let's do that in second step. So we have created this function. It works perfectly fine. Okay, the command is perfect. There is no problem in it. But let's do this. Let's do a refresh here. You should be able to see the whole section, right? This is like client, then request, then integration request, then get call, integration response, method response, and response coming back to the client. Let's do a quick test from here. You get internal server error. Do you know why? Because we are not supplying one important thing, which is proxy integration. Okay, why? Because it's a third party HTTP call, and this is something that usually people forget. What you need to do is same command, you add another option. Acha, by the way, in this thing you can simply if you want to do some changes in the existing stuff, you can simply do this, API gateway put integration call again on the same API, and it would override the existing changes. So what I've done is I've added a call of HTTP proxy. Now let's do a test here. I believe I might have to reload. No, it's working fine. So as you can see, we are able to get the logs from the API endpoint that we have just integrated. Okay, so what was missing? Missing part was this type. Okay, that when you create an external HTTP endpoint, you need to define how do you want to process the parameters. How do you want to supply things from your client to the server who is going to give you the response. Okay, now couple of important things. Now how do I test this outside? Okay, so what we usually do is after this thing is created, we go to the stage. Then there are no stages right now, which means this API is not live anywhere. It is not, it hasn't got a live API endpoint that you can hit and get the request, right? Now, how do we get that? So usually what we do is we create a stage through which we get this endpoint created, right? So next step that we need to do is create a deployment. Okay. So same thing. Let's do. Let's understand this command quickly. So, oh, what happened? Okay. So in this thing, we do create deployment. To create a new deployment stage, okay, we provide the REST API ID, and then we provide the region with the stage name and description. Okay. This is going to create a new deployment. Okay, you get an ID here. Take a note of this ID because it is going to be very important. But before that, let's see if the changes are available on the live. Okay, as you can see, the test interface is available, test deployment is available, and this is the URL which has been created for that particular API endpoint. Now understand one thing, how do we test this locally? How do I know, uh, which particular endpoint, which particular endpoint to hit when something is live? Okay, so the default path, the default thing which is, let me put it here so that everybody can see. So the default structure of an API URL, API endpoint is this. So you know the REST API ID that you have, right? So we already know the REST API ID. Execute API, the region. Now we have a very default region, US East 2. Now what interface, what deployment that we have created? We have created a deployment called test. In that, uh, which endpoint, that which resource we created? Okay, so we created a call users. Okay, this is how it's gonna look, right? This is how we'll be able to test this thing. So let's quickly check against this. So if I want to make a user's call, what is the endpoint that I need to do? So if you can see, this is the API ID, execute api.useast2 Amazon AWS.com/test/users. This is the endpoint that we need to hit. Okay, so what we are going to do is let's do call fnx get. Let's do this endpoint. There is one change in it. We don't need to do users. Okay, so your API endpoint is live. You will be able to fetch all the details and all those things, by doing everything. So that's the last thing that I had. Okay, so idea is how to create your own S3 buckets using CLI, how to create your Lambda functions, how to manage them locally, how to create API gateway. Okay, API gateway is one of the trickiest thing to do, but when you don't have access to console, you need to find a ways you can manage your AWS instances directly through CLI, and that's the right way to start. Okay, what I usually do is whenever I find something tricky, I create a shell script and keep it with me. So whenever I have a customer who needs to have something running and doing different stuff on it, I go and use this script and deploy all my resources using that. So that's gonna be last thing that I'm going to discuss. Okay, I'll be taking questions now. So hit your all the questions that you have. I already have a question from Udit. Is there a way to print parent or a root resource ID when we hit API gateway create command so we don't need to hit get resources? Good question. Is there a way to print root? Okay, I haven't done that yet. So what I usually do is I always do get resources. But good question. I definitely would look into this, and I'll put an update onto my blog whether we could hit the resource ID as well along with uh, when we do this create API endpoint. I'll check for that and I'll update that onto my blog. Okay, guys. Any other questions? Hit it through. Let's see the questions one by one. Okay, guys, hit your questions so that I can answer your questions one by one. It's gonna take some time for people to hear me and then ask questions. Okay. Jigar, Nilesh, are there any questions coming in? Because I don't see them on live chat yet. Okay, guys, I think we don't have any more questions. Then, let's conclude the session here. Thanks a lot for everybody to coming in, and stay tuned to this YouTube channel because in May month, uh, I'm working out couple of options for bringing good speakers, good international speakers to our channel so that we can share their knowledge and we can learn from them. So stay tuned to this channel. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, go subscribe. If you haven't subscribed to our Twitter, please do that as well so that you get all the latest updates coming in from our community. Okay, thanks a lot, guys. Bye bye.